Hello, everybody. This is Fernando for the latest Ninja Turtles podcast. I thought I would dedicate this video to talk about a culmination of the deleted scenes that were apparently within the Ninja Turtles movie that were never shown or never released, and to this day have not been placed on any of the DVD Blu-ray editions that just came out. So who knows if we'll see these deleted scenes anytime soon. I have a feeling that when the Ninja Turtles sequel comes out in 2016, that there will be something in terms of a re-release of the first film that'll probably have these deleted scenes, kind of like a 1.5 edition, if you will. So anything involving these scenes, where I gathered these from, it came actually from a lot of B-roll footage that is available right now on YouTube. B-roll is more on the lines of like behind the scenes, fly in the wall type stuff, where literally somebody is there during the filming of each scene, but they're in the background filming the scene themselves. Like fly in a wall, just like I said. It's somebody like almost voyeuristic. You get to see what's happening within each scene as it's occurring. And also, I got some of this info from lots of pictures about the movie, pictures that were included in that visual guide of the Turtles' history that was released, and then other pictures that have popped up online here and there. It goes to show there were actually a lot of changes within the film itself, probably enough changes to add a good amount of footage afterward. So again, whether we're going to see these particular scenes anytime soon, who knows, but at least with regards to these scenes, they're there, they were filmed, they weren't just conceptualized, they weren't just placed into artwork. No, they're actually there somewhere, filmed in the can, and all this takes now is some of the release to place them for our visual purposes. So the biggest set of scenes that were filmed, that were cut from the film, have to do with William Fichtner's character, Eric Sachs, being the Shredder. I've talked about that before ad nauseum, but I'm going to talk about the scene specifically that I saw that proved that yes, he was indeed the Shredder, and these were how the scenes were filmed with that in mind. The first most prominent scene, and the one that has the most pictures, happens to be the one of him where he visits with April inside his mansion. And within the film, when that visit just culminated with him showcasing that mural where he talks about his history, his background, and then he's talking to her about the painting slash mural itself, and then it ended there. But apparently a whole other set of scenes were filmed that had him continuing his tour, but it was taking more of a sinister turn. At first, and I mention this because at first he showed her his armory, all that stuff involving his Shredder-like costume. That didn't just happen out of thin air. He actually had a fascination with Japanese and Oriental armory. There's pictures and B-roll footage of him showcasing April, a whole other room filled to the wall with Shredder-like armory. And that was very telltale because he's basically giving himself away, which the scene later confirmed. First, there's pictures of him showcasing April that armory, pointing out stuff here and there, and then there are pictures of him putting on a Shredder-like glove. I don't know if this was the actual glove of him, like as the Shredder, before he upgraded his armory to the more mechanized version that we saw in the film, but it sure did look like an older, I guess, Mark I version of a Shredder-like glove. Think of it like, the Iron Man costumes, how they advanced and there were different marks. Same concept. This was probably an earlier Shredder costume. And other pictures lead to the more sinister side of the scene, because with him basically giving away that he is the Shredder to April, Other photos showcase the Foot Clan suddenly being there in that same room with him and April in the armory room, and they have April captive. Like, they physically have her captive. They're holding on to her by her arms, because by this point, it's assuming that he has pretty much told her that he is the Shredder, and he's kidnapped her, probably as a way, if the scene and the script would have stayed as is, as a way to try to lure the Turtles to him, as opposed to April luring the Turtles to him, as we saw in the film. So, in fact, the pictures show that she no longer has like her yellow coat anymore. I don't know what that's about, but the scene showcases the Foot Clan have her captive. In fact, later scenes in and around that area of the script would have had the Turtles rescuing her, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. But another area where it shows him as the original concept of the Shredder, he's walking around that basement level within his mansion, the one that we saw in the film where the now real Shredder was frequenting most. Well, in the original version, he's the one walking around in the basement of his mansion, and the Foot Clan are there with him. This was that area that was a little darker room that looked like it was like a gym room of some sort where martial arts could be practiced. Well, that was him walking around, and the pictures showed him again with the Foot Clan, and he also had more like a darker costume. I think it was reminiscent of that black spandex-like costume that he wore towards the end of the film when it was the climax of the film, and he was there in his laboratory trying to release the toxin. It seemed like he was wearing that, but there were no indications in those photos of the other Shredder, the one that was later revealed to be the Shredder within the film, because at this point it was him, William Fichtner. Eric Sachs's character was the actual Shredder. But yeah, those are pictures there. My apologies, I can't post them on here. If you go to my Facebook page, you will see some of the pictures that I'm talking about. But otherwise, for copyright and trademark purposes, that's why I keep this like a podcast. But there are pictures that are out there in the internet that show what I'm talking about. So if you see any of those, you'll know exactly what I'm referring to. Now, other deleted scenes seem to be focused on April. It seems like she also had a good number of scenes that were cut or altered from the film, stuff that would have really added a good amount of time, extra time for her. Whether that's good or whether that's bad, I don't know. It seems like people had a good feel of April, and others were complaining that the film focused too much on her. I was fine with her being sort of the main focus of the film because it's the human perspective. But in any case, these were some of the scenes that her role was cut. I mentioned earlier that when she was in that armory room with Eric Sachs's character, and he basically revealed himself as Shredder, she was kidnapped. Well, there was supposed to have been scenes with her being rescued by the Turtles, because I've seen photos and B-roll footage of her essentially being in the lair of the Turtles, not through volunteerism. In other words, she didn't, like in the film that we saw, she didn't show up somewhere on top of a building to be led by the Turtles. No, in this case, they actually had her there in the lair, and at least by the pictures, they were keeping her there for her safety. So that means they must have rescued her somehow, some way. One of the Turtles, or all four of them, must have rescued her from the mansion and then kept her there in the lair, which the rest of the movie would have then gone to its normal route of the Foot Clan and the Shredder later attacking them in the lair. But B-roll footage does show that. In fact, it specifically shows her with Vern. Interestingly enough, that Vern from the film, there in the lair with her, being held not necessarily captive, but being prevented from leaving the lair again for their safety. And then it shows the guy that played Michelangelo within the film. He had on like all that stuff on him that was used to create the motion capture. He's asking April if she would like to take a tour of the lair, and she kind of gets up from her area that she's being held I keep saying held, but at least she's being there, kept there for her safety. And she goes, yeah. And then when Michelangelo starts to do the tour with April, Vern tries to go along, but he says, not you. And so Vern sits back down. That was very interesting because it gave away the fact that Vern would have known about their existence much earlier than the film that we saw, where he basically learns of their existence through Raphael in the van when Raphael suddenly pops out. And that's where he says, you're a talking turtle. So he would have known about them much, much earlier. Also, there's another scene. I don't know exactly where this would have fit within the film. Presumably, it would have been after the three turtles were kidnapped by the Shredder and the Foot Clan and taken to that laboratory, and Raphael was left back in the lair. But there would have been a scene where April is trying to escort Raphael through the city while he's in costume. And it actually would have paid homage to the original Ninja Turtles film, the one where Raphael comes out of the theater and he's dressed like in a trench coat and he has on that detective type hat. I think it's called a fedora. He has it on because he's trying to remain incognito. Same concept, but in this film, in this version, there are photos where he's completely covered, head to toe. Not a single bit of his green skin is showing anywhere. He's covered everything. Like, he's got sunglasses, he's got a scarf covering most of his face, he's got the fedora covering the rest of it, his trench coat is completely covered, his hands are covered. I think he even has like his sais covered within the hands. Everything from the pants covering all the way to the bottom of his toes. Nothing is showing, and it actually looks, and I can see why it was cut from the film, it looks a little bit ridiculous because the amount of time it would have taken to cover him up like this, first of all, to find clothing that would fit somebody as tall and as muscular as him, and then let alone have to cover him and make sure that it fits, and then have to walk him through the city looking like this, it would have actually created, in a realistic way, more attention to him than its purpose of not trying to. And I know, again, in a film where we're talking about talking turtles, realism should be thrown at the door. But again, you can suspend disbelief, but at the same time you can't throw it all away. So seeing him in this ridiculous costume, that deleted scene would have had her escorting him in and around the area of New York City, presumably to try to get to the mansion to rescue the turtles. And I'm guessing that's where they had instead the scene where he jumps in the van, and the talking turtle scene where Vern meets him for the first time. That's where I'm assuming that they went that way instead. Also, there's B-roll footage of another scene with April, and it seems like she's in Sax's building towards the end of the film, that laboratory area, and she's screaming Shredder. And then that's when the scene cuts. It's interesting to note because it makes it seem like, again, they were going with the angle during that scene where Eric Sachs is the Shredder and not the other guy being the Shredder, because she's there in the same area that would be Eric Sachs's area within the film, not at the top of the building, but again in the laboratory area, and she's screaming out Shredder. So again, it would have been like she's confronting him. So it would have been using the scenario that Eric Sachs and the Shredder are the same person, but that was another scene that seemed to be cut. And then finally, something else, that there's no footage of this that I've seen or any photos that I've seen, but this comes straight from Megan Fox's mouth. She's saying that there were scenes cut where she was actually fighting. She was much more of a fighter within the film. In fact, she said this, I think it was something along the lines like she herself knew some ninja moves or something, because there were going to be scenes of her fighting off the Foot Clan, like actually being able to take them on and using, I believe, some of the weapons that she was able to get from the turtles, presumably like the Raphael sai, because there are photos of her with Raphael sai, like holding it in her hand. But she said those were cut because it wouldn't have made much sense if you have somebody who's your average young girl suddenly being able to take on grown men who are far more advanced in their fighting skills, she said it wouldn't have made sense. Finally, another scene that I've seen, not with April or Eric Sachs, but another deleted scene that was in the B-roll footage, was Vern. That scene where he meets April. He's playing around with the hats because he thinks that that she called him for like a date of some sort, but it's really, of course, to get to the mansion. He's playing around the hat in the mirror in front of his van. The B-roll footage shows that instead of her coming from his right-hand side, like from the corner, instead she's coming and walking towards him from very far back. So that scene would have showed that she's looking at him all the way as she's walking towards him, and she's seeing how ridiculous he looks trying on his hat in various poses while he's not aware that she is looking at him. And then that's when she makes that line, "What's with the ridiculous hat?" And that's when he says, yeah, what is with that hat? It's not really, it's my friend's, and that kind of stuff. So it would have been interesting to see that scene because she would have seen how crazy he was. And then finally, it switched to the shorter scene that we saw within the film. But if anyone knows anything else, any other exercise scenes, something else that was cut from the film that I haven't talked about, please post it below. Again, I wish I could post any of the photos that I talked about. I will post, though, the B-roll footage, the link to it, directly below. So check it out when you have a chance. You'll be able to see what I'm talking about. But again, check out my Facebook page, too, and you'll be able to see some of the photos that I also illustrated. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again, as always. Take care.